getting closer to the Springboks' first official test of the year. We saw last week they beat the Barbarians quite handily. And to look at the game at Loftus and just from a bit of a defensive perspective and then just a bit of a different perspective, joined again by Joey Mongalo, defense coach for the Sharks, former S under 20 assistant coach, and a man who knows his way around the rugby field. Welcome, Joey.
Thank you, Brennan. It's good to be with you again 2 weeks in a row. I think by the third week, you don't have to do an introduction anymore.
Well, I hope people who are watching this haven't watched you last week, so then you'll get a few more people to come in. You must actually tell your friends and family, yeah?
I like that. Good plan.
Yeah. Gentlemen, just let's start with last week's game against the Barbarians. A very one-sided game. The Barbarians weren't what we thought they would be, which I mean that's been spoken to about and quite a lot, and it's also was a wet weather game. But just from a Springbok point of view, I mean, they obviously dominated the game. They controlled every facet of it, and the Barbarians didn't really have much of a defense. So we spoke about last week how difficult it is to get a team together and defend like that against a team that's very determined. But did you pick up anything in the Bok play that you found was interesting?
Brennan, I thought what we spoke about last week came to life, So from the Springbok perspective, 3 areas for me were very important is that the set piece remained dominant. So that was always a big area for us. And so for that to be dominant with us and Nati scrumming as well, and the line out mauling was really good. So that was a good, pleasing area for the Boks. The second part was the attack. I thought in those conditions, we say it's wet weather conditions, the way we handled the ball was really good. I think further out in face play was impressive, but also then close to the line. It seems easy to come around the corner in close quarters to handle the ball, but I thought the way we handled the ball was really impressive. And also to put up a score, doesn't matter who you play against, anything other side of 50 is impressive. And then lastly, defensively, I think it's easy for games like that to run away and become a 45-32 or 45-25 game. But the fact that we kept really a good low score on that side will be really pleasing for January Flannery and the defensive leaders in his team.
I mean, I know you're more a defense guy, but I mean, I was just thinking the one that I watched again this morning was just the lead up to Kurtney's try, and just how Marnie sort of came around the near touch line, stretched the defense, and then it went back and was again in the line there on the way back before Damon put the kick through for Kurtney to obviously score. The way they manipulated the Barbarians around the field was very impressive on the day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also to see a physically dominant team score tries with front foot kicks says a lot, So it obviously shows there's a quiver that's added to their skill set and to their arrows of scoring points was very impressive. And like you said with Marnie, I just think the work ethic of the guys is something that's it's almost as if you can't play for the Springboks if you don't have supernatural work ethic or if there's not an emphasis on how hard you work. Gifting is one thing, but you can see all of them with and without the ball are really hard workers.
I was speaking earlier in the week to Nick Mallett, and one of the things he pointed out, which was quite good, was he said one of the things that's becoming more and more apparent in this Bok team is the fact that they're not so worried about the outside pressures, that the competition from within the squad is almost more what keeps them focused and keeps them motivated. And if you look at the individuals that are around and the changes that have been made this week, only strengthening, and still the players who are injured that can come back, we were really getting to that point very much like the All Blacks were in that 2011, 2015 stage, where whatever team they pick and that competition within the team is probably a bigger driver than the expectation from outside.
Yeah, and that's very good. And I think one thing that's easy to look past with that, Brendan, is South African rugby has generally always been strong for numbers. But this is one of the times where the coaching group have got those numbers coordinated. So as in the guy who's number 5 or 6 in the pecking order knows that he's in and around the mix. So I think the way they've grown the group, and like with everything in life, when you start with 10 people, it's easy to have principles and frameworks you work by. But when that becomes 20, 30, 40, 50 people, how do you stay aligned is probably one of the feathers in the coaching group's cap, is that they've got the ability to get the guy who's 50th and 60th in the camp doing exactly that, putting pressure on the guy who's number 1 and 2. So I almost want to say the way they've amalgamated the talent, aligned the talent, and having the talent put pressure on each other is something massive for leadership. It's really, really well done.
Yeah, looking at the selection this week, it's a very impressive selection, given that there's a number of stars still out. And I just think the names that Rossi said were coming back next week, the Peter Stephs, Makazole, Grant Williams, and who's the fourth one? There's one more that I'm thinking of, Sia, obviously. How can I forget Sia? But those four coming back, if you think they're not even in the mix, and the squad he's picked is pretty much close to full strength, barring injuries at the moment.
Yes, and I would almost say, like, I know he's a Sharks boy, but also for Vincent Koch to have been taken into this main group, per se, in inverted commas, is a big plus point for him. But another thing I've been thinking about, Brendan, is like the leadership in the teams. You mentioned four guys still to come back. Sia's the captain of the team. Peter Steff is captain of the team. Now Jesse Creel is another captain. Andre Pollard is a guy who's been a vice captain and can easily captain the team. Eben Etzebeth is captain the Sharks. So now you're suddenly running onto the field. Vincent Tutuko has been the captain of the Sharks Curry Cup team and also some URC games. So suddenly you're running on the team when you're looking around and there's more captains than actual players in the team. So it says a lot about the leadership that's grown in that space. So when the tough gets going, you've got a ratio of 1:2. You know, there's one guy, one potential captain looking after one other, instead of having a ratio of maybe two captains and 13 guys who aren't necessarily leaders or haven't been grown as leaders. So I think that's probably going to be one of our strong points going forward, is that we're not just building a squad, but we're building a leadership group as well.
You talk about Vincent there. I mean, he's a guy who maybe, I mean, I know he got a lot of plaudits this last week for his performance there, but I think the thing that impressed me, and not saying that he doesn't do this for the Sharks, because he does it a lot of the time, but sometimes it goes unnoticed, is just the amount of work he did off the ball, and the way he got around that field. I mean, he scored 2 tries, and I mean, he got obviously a lot of attention for that. But off the ball, he was extremely busy, and probably I haven't seen his stats yet, but I'm sure his stats are pretty high as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something that he takes massive pride in. And as we started in the beginning of this call, is that if you don't have that element, I just don't think the Springboks look at you. So I think one of the core things that they would have seen in him, apart from his physicality, his carry, his tackle, his efforts with the ball, what he does without the ball is next level. So it's almost like due reward for what do I say? He's a Springbok selection that shows the mindset of this current coaching group. Is, yes, we see your talent and your gifting's wonderful. Everyone's got that, but I think the point of difference is, what are you doing when nobody's looking?
A lot has been said about obviously the attack this last week, and I talked about how the attack is evolving. And I've even written a couple of articles about it this week as well. But in a situation like this, where you're playing a team that is obviously not expected to trouble you as much as a top 5 team, should we say. Italy are ranked 10th in the world. They're not expected to come within 30 points of the BOKS, probably in most people's accounts. I know it might sound a bit arrogant to anybody watching that, but I mean, that's just generally what you'd expect, number 1 against number 10 in the world. What's the dangers, should I say, in terms of defense and underestimating these guys, specifically looking at Italy? And in the same breath, what have you picked up about their attack?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part of the question, Brennan, and say I think we should all be wary. I think the Italians under Quesada have been a different group. I mean, he himself was a fly half, so fly halves aren't really known for defensive strategy. They're known for how they are with ball in hand. So I think they'll definitely have trick plays up their sleeves. Italian rugby has improved so much over the last 5 to 10 years that you've got a generation of rugby player who's growing up with being very comfortable with the ball. So I think they will pose definitely some kind of a threat against us. They've got some individuals in that team. The one guy, I forget they call him Mosquito. He's a left wing who plays for Zebre. So they've got guys who've got individual brilliance. If you can think about, I know they haven't picked their team yet, but a guy like Brex in the midfield. So they've got big, strong ball carriers in the midfield that could potentially get momentum for them. And they've got some guys in the wider channels who have got a lot of magic. So I think there is a threat there. And in the first part of your question with the Springboks and how they'll prepare, they're very much, I believe, a team that's saying they take pride in how they defend and focusing on making sure that they remain a feared team defensively. So I'm sure Jerry and them will put in work. Who they play against matters in terms of tactically, but it won't matter in terms of their heart and what they care about defensively. So I think you will expect just as physically dominant, highly intent on hurting people and putting skill set under pressure with their line speed defensive performance.
Yeah, I was going to say there's been quite apparent that some of the players that have spoken this week have spoken one about the threat. They've obviously got the message that they to get out there that you're not underestimating Italy. That's the one part, and the other part that's been come really through from some of the interviews is just how the internal standards. A lot of them, Bongi, Andre, Jasper, Damien, have all said sort of. It's not about what the scoreline is, etc. It's about meeting our own standards, and that comes back to what I said earlier about the pressure being put on inside the camp. Because I think one thing you probably picked up, and Rossi said quite often, is that the plan works as long as it's going well. So as long as the players are doing and the plan's going forward, other players will get chance. There'll be more rotation, that sort of thing. But it's one of those things where those standards. I'm trying to put it, what I'm trying to come to is, and I'm talking myself a bit in circles here, but what I'm trying to come to is what would be a satisfactory outcome for the Springboks this weekend. Obviously, a victory is first and foremost, but you're playing a team that, as you say, has got some threats up their sleeve, and it's not always going to be about the scoreline, but about what those internal standards that the Boks have. So, I mean, what do you see as a satisfactory performance for the Boks this week?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Brendan. I think we're busy watching almost like a masterclass in performance. You know, all these cliches that people say, focus on yourself, focus on your processes. These guys are actually living that. And to your question now, what are we expecting is they would have looked at the, the Barbarians game and said to themselves, we definitely got good rewards and started to see signs of what we've been working on in this preseason. Now, how do we go a level up from that? So I'm sure they would have said, okay, we've got this winter series now. We've got however many test matches. What do we want to look like at the end of those test matches towards what we want to be in 2027 come the World Cup? So I'm just saying it's improved performance. Whatever they did on attack, it's how are we even more clinical? How do we keep the ball even more? How are we even more accurate with the front foot kicks? And what if they do stay back and they see the front foot kicks? Do we then take the running space? So it's almost going to be an improvement on what has been done. So apart from the scoreboard, as you said earlier, I reckon the coaches and the team will be watching that game and saying, okay, are we better than what we were this time last week? And then again, the question after when they play Italy again, can we be better than what we were this time the previous week?
So they obviously had one good win over Wales in the Six Nations. They almost a team that are sort of bordering on that breakthrough every single year, but they just don't quite get there. They've definitely improved in a lot of ways under Gonzalo Quesada now. But they still haven't made that breakthrough as a really big win other than the Welsh game. And I think Wales have lost so many games now at the moment. I'm not sure they'll count that, but I'm not sure we'll count it as the rest of the world as their big breakthrough. Looking at Benetton and Zebra, the type of rugby they play, and when you guys analysed them for the Sharks, what did you pick up there that you have to be wary of in terms of just general players?
No, I think it's good, and I think both teams offer different things. So we with the Sharks, we had a closer game that we would have wanted against Zebra, and I just think the game got loose, and if the ball lies around these transitions, teams like the Italians can punish you. So I think that's one area where in transition is a good opportunity for them. And then on the other side of that spectrum is if it's a game that's tighter and it's set piece orientated and the ball in play is not as high, then I think you take that element away from them. And what you mentioned about them as a team and the Six Nations having won against Wales only, I find that if you look at them, they do two things are worth noting. Is one, if they start a game really well, it sounds silly, but somebody who's the underdog in inverted brackets starts well, they build a lot of belief and they stay in the game for a very long time. I think that's one thing. The other one is they've stayed in the game for longer periods of time, so they haven't gone away so easy. It's almost like in the last 10-15 minutes that the scoreline gets blown away slightly against other teams in the Six Nations. So that says it's a nation of people who are becoming more and more competitive at test level. So then for us, it's going to be a great test for our bench. And as I can see now, we've gone for a normal, it's not a 6-2 bench with Faf and, is it Villy, hey? Faf and,
Yeah,
it's Faf
really,
and
yeah.
Villy. So I think that's going to be a good test for our 6-2 bench, because they're going to have to then, whatever hope is there after 50, 60 minutes, it's probably their job to quash that hope and then hopefully finish the game off strong for the Springboks.
We were talking a bit earlier about last week, and I wanted to get your take on it. I mean, there's been a lot of opinions this week about Andre Esterhuizen and him slotting in at flank. He certainly has the size and the bulk, and he's got something that a lot of flankers probably got a bit of a better pass than most flankers across the park. And I'm not being disrespectful to some of the flankers there. I think that goes without saying. The midfielders normally do the skip passes and things like that. But certainly a lot of opinions about him as a hybrid player. Now, I just want to get it. It's been mentioned a couple of times that you guys used him at the Sharks at flank at one occasion. First of all, just maybe take us through that, what happened there in that occasion and how did it turn out, and just your thoughts on him packing down at flank in the second half.
Yeah, Bren, I think when it happened with us, it definitely wasn't by design. So we had I think we had an injury at loose forward, and then somebody was off for a blood bin. I think it was James Fenter was on for blood or a concussion test. It's one of those things that they take players off the field for. So we needed somebody in that position, and he was all too happy to do it. I think maybe the tight head might have complained about his scrumming technique, but over and above that, he's such a. It's almost worth taking, Brennan, that it's easy to have a forward wanting potentially to play in the backs, but to go the opposite way around, not a lot of people will do that. And it says a lot about the man that he is. Like, he's probably one of the most selfless human beings you'll get, one of the most cohesive team men you'll get. Like, he just gets people around him, and he's got this natural leadership about him. So what does that have to do with him playing loose forward? It says that he's got that ability because he's got the desire to sacrifice himself for the team. But then if you look at it, you mentioned it, his physicality is like a loose forward. He may as well be one of them. His size, I won't be surprised if he gets lifted at the back of the lineout, because he's just as tall as any other loose forward who'll be at the back of the lineout. And then his carry clean, his tackle and fold, all of that stuff is in place. So now that it's been done, it's actually a no-brainer, because everything fits that mold. I just think you get people like Rassie and them who are brave enough to make a call like that. But all the signs were there that something like this could happen.
Yeah, I was going to say the one thing I picked up. I wrote a piece this morning just about the better part of it for me, and this is now not focusing on the individual. I just thought maybe I'll test you if you agree with this, but the brilliance of the move in a way is that if you're an opposition coach, if you're the All Blacks or you Ireland or France, and you're planning now already to counter the Boks when you meet them later this year, the one thing it does, it absolutely almost bamboozles your planning if Andre Esterhuizen's on the bench, or Andre Esterhuizen or somebody similar, because you don't know if he's going to come on the second half as a loose forward or he's going to come on, and that must make it a bit difficult. And it gets to the point. I was put it to Don earlier this week about, are we getting close to the 8-0 bench? And I don't mean 8 forwards there, but I mean we could easily get a scenario where you have a Quokka on the bench and who can play in the back line, and you have an Andre Esterhuizen on the bench, and then 6 other forwards, and you can easily put all 8 of them onto the park in the forward pack if you wanted to. So it's certainly going to give opposition coaches a lot more food for thought, and if you're coaching against that sort of thing, it's one extra thing to worry about. And I think it makes, and even if you don't do it, you keep them busy on it for a little while extra, which they wouldn't normally be. So I think that's the brilliance of the move.
Yeah, and it says again a lot about the people in charge of Springbok rugby at the moment, Bren. If you take it, how does one win a World Cup and then win another one, and what's the next level? Because people always chasing you. So to me, it seems like you've got a group of people who their systems and their processes are so in order that it's buying them some capacity on the top end to keep thinking strategically, how do we stay ahead of people? So if you're the opposition and you spend time trying to focus on how do I catch the Springboks, I don't think they give you that opportunity, because while you're sort of dealing with the here and now, they've already ahead of time trying to think, what is the next thing? Like, which law is there that we can go on and double click on that'll make us better? Which match scenario is there? So I think you've just got guys who are light years ahead of the position. So if you're asking me, and I was preparing for the Springboks, I'd almost say just like focus on yourself, like just see, can I get through the here and now of what I do know? Because you could waste energy on trying to think, what could they bring to me? And they wouldn't bring it all, they'll bring something completely different. And again, once again, it's just a compliment to the current people are just, they've got a system in place that's second to none at the moment.
Can I ask you for a prediction for this weekend? What do you expect is going to happen? How much
It's
is the altitude gonna affect the Italians?
Yeah, I think if you take a combination, Brennan, altitude this time of the year should be dry. So you'd expect a little bit more of an expansive game than what we had in Cape Town. That's one facet to think about. The other one is our 6-2 bench. So if the starting pack does the damage that they can do to the Italians and those guys come on, those other six, and they put on just as much damage, I think that's where you could have a scrum penalty, kick out, maul penalty, potentially a play off the advantage and score. So I would say expecting a pretty tight contested game for about 55 to 60 minutes. But then I think in the last 20, if we've hit our straps in that first 60, that score line could become a little bit more impressive for the Springboks.
So just a last one for me. Just have you been watching British Lions at all, or British Irish Lions? Any thoughts on them so far? What you've seen so far?
It was interesting. I was actually thinking this morning about their planning. Playing this midweek game and then on weekends, just what that planning looks like, because they played some of the guys who you'd think are in their main side in this midweek team. So what does that look like going forward? So I thought the planning was interesting. A point of concern for me is, in both games, they've conceded quite early. So I think there's something there. If you're Australia, you're saying to yourself, listen, this is not a midweek game where 7-0 down is not just becoming like this weekend 54, whatever the game ended. At 7-0 down in a test match, Australia will say to themselves, yes, if we could potentially win the first 20 minutes of a test match against them, it's a home game, the crowd gets behind us, that could be a point of advantage for the home side and maybe a point of concern for the British and Irish. And then obviously they haven't hit their straps yet, even though the scoreline blew out of control a bit the last 20. So I think attack-wise, they'll probably be looking and saying, okay, what is our best way in the most limited amount of time to put points on the scoreboard? Because playing fancy and beautiful rugby is also fine, but no one's going to care about that. Someone's going to look back and say, in 2025, the British and Irish Lions went to Australia. What did the scoreboard look like? So I think they'll be mulling over what's the best way. I'm sure you've got an ideal way of how you want to play, but after 2 games, now you're trying to figure out what is the best way for us to get points on the board and more points than the opposition.
Well, and I suppose you've got to move very much towards a test team and a midweek team pretty soon, because the tests aren't that far away as well. The one aspect I picked up, and just maybe your thoughts on that, they tend to have, you say early on they concede, but they tend to have a couple of chinks in their midfield, especially out wide. Duan van der Merwe against the Reds made a couple of defensive mistakes. There are one or two sort of vulnerabilities at the moment. I say at the moment because they'll obviously be working hard on them, that the Aussies can exploit, and especially in that first half. The Force, I thought, especially in that first half, probed them quite a lot. If they had maybe a bit more strike power, they could have probably scored, and they probably should have scored given the dominance they had in the first half. But one thing is, you're going to have to play for 80 minutes against these guys, because second half they got a lot stronger, and they've got the depth on the bench to bring on and to change the game as well.
Yep, I agree with you. The last part of what you said is massive. The bench that they have will always make an impact. And I thought defensively, it's a difficult one, because traditionally I would have thought most of the teams in the British and Irish Lions side would have had like a pretty soft defensive system. But now with some of the Irish boys who are used to a bit of a more of a line speed system, I think getting those two systems together will take a bit more time than maybe what would have been in the past, which will be an interesting way to see how they figure that one out. I think that's the one thing. And like you said, I just think it's somewhere they're hoping it's going to click before the first test match. I think that's what you're looking for. You've put in so much work, you've analyzed, you've planned. And sometimes in sport, you need a bounce of a ball, or you need a try-saving tackle that just clicks everything in place, and then things go on at the rate that you would have hoped that they would go on. So I think they're there. I think they planned well, trained well. Things will come together. I think they're just waiting for one of two moments in their next game to see if that'll get them going forward.
And your prediction for the series? Do you think it's going to be a 3-0?
Yeah, and I think I would say the British and Irish Lions to win. 3-0, I'm not sure. I think it might be a bit of a 2-1. And one, I think, I just being at home, Aussie rugby under, why would I forget his name now?
Joe Schmidt.
Under Joe Smith, I think they're a different type. I think they're a different breed at the moment. So I think they've got a test match win in them there. But what you said now about the bench, I mean, you've got guys who start for their home nations waiting on the bench to come on. I think it gives them that bomb squad-like effectivity with their bench. So if the games are tight or they're slightly behind, they've got high caliber players to come on and try to take them home.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I see it's obviously a lot warmer there in KZN at the moment than it is here. You can see I'm sitting with the jacket on. You're sitting in a t-shirt, it seems. So enjoy the good weather while we sit here in the cold.
There's no winter up here. There's no winter down here. Thanks, Brendan.
Joey, good chatting to you as always. We'll chat again next week and we'll have a bit more context. I think the Barbarians game didn't give us that much context for the season, gave us a couple of pointers, but I think this game will give us a lot more context going into the rest of the season as well.
Thanks, Brendan, and thanks to you and all your viewers. Take care.
Yeah. Cheers, man. Thanks. We'll chat soon.
Cheers.